Good point. It's difficult not to talk about Donald Trump nowadays, or perhaps ever since the mid 2010s, actually. But I was wondering, let's say Donald Trump would have lost the last presidential elections, and Kamala Harris would have been the president. Everything you mentioned before, to my extent, to my knowledge, or at least the way I interpret it, as structural, meaning it's there, whether Trump or not is there, we have the same issues. Would the policy have been that, or would the overall approach to statecraft, as you said, been the same under Harris, or would we have seen more maybe kicking the can down the road, or something else as a response to those structural problems that the U.S. is facing?
I think it would have been the same and different. The problems were recognized openly as exactly the same. How does the US retain its primary global position, deal with inequality at home, and strengthen its military arm in a contested world environment, particularly against a really incredibly powerful challenger like China, and working in collaboration with Russia and Iran and North Korea? How does it do that in a contested world? The difference would have been that the former Biden admin, and one presumes the Harris admin that would have been, had a idealist response to this, which is presuming that you do everything better in collaboration with others, and equally quite a pacifist one, which was that war doesn't solve anything, and that threatening people doesn't achieve anything. So it very rarely used military force itself. It was constantly trying to build bridges against that coalition, but it was deadly afraid of ever crossing any red lines that might trigger something happening. But they certainly used some economic statecraft tools, like tariffs, for example, export controls, sanctions. We did see these things, particularly against Russia. The problem was, and is, with idealism, that everyone else has to be prepared to act with you. And for all of the nice meetings that happened with Europe, and of all the statements of support and like-mindedness and brotherhood, etc., no one did anything. And whether you do or don't agree with what Trump is doing, and I'm not taking a personal stance here, I'm absolutely not. I'm trying to look at it objectively as an analyst. Pivoting from idealism to radical realism, which is what the Trump administration has done, which is to say, these are our self-interests, and we will act in them, and we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, effectively, but we will shift around as we have to in order to achieve these particular targets. So if we have to be more friendly with Russia, we'll be more friendly with Russia. If we have to just walk away from Europe, we'll walk away from Europe. Only by acting like that are we now seeing transformative change happen. So you may absolutely despair of the messenger, and many people do. You may despair of the way in which these things are being discussed, and many people do. But we are now starting to see transformative change happen. Now, that doesn't mean it will work, and that doesn't mean that things change for the better. But to answer your question and to loop back to it, whoever was running the US would have been faced with the same strategic dilemmas. If they'd gone for the idealist approach, a lot of people would be happier, shall we say. A lot of people within that middle class, the upper part of the middle class that we were referring to, would be far happier, but the underlying situation would not be getting any better. Things are now changing, and it remains to be seen for the better or the worse.
I'll fast forward to a question I had for later on, but let's say Trump technically should step aside in 2029. So that's his second term. Let's just say J.D. Vance doesn't become president and the Democrats get back in power. Are we seeing a radical shift once again in American policy?
Well, I mean, if you look at one thing as a mirror to that, look at the Middle East. Under Obama, you had this radical shift away from US traditional policy there to suddenly say Iran, which hates the US and burns the American flag and calls it the big Satan all the time. They're our future friends in the region. And the region was just shocked to its core. Like, how can this possibly be US policy? But something for Europe and Canada to consider today, by the way, in terms of how things can flip with an election. Then Trump won, flipped all the way back and said, no, Iran's our enemy, blah, 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 etc. And we go back to the old book. Biden comes in, immediately takes the Houthis off the terrorist list, who then proceed to block the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, etc.
The US is about to attack the Houthis too.
And pivots back to Iran again. All the same people come back in. Trump comes back in, we're anti-Iran again. So you can have a huge pivot on one area, you could potentially see a huge pivot, but I don't think it will change the fact that China is central to the US thinking. And the only issue then becomes, again, are we idealist in building a coalition? Are we realist or not? But what's important is, after having had, now it will be 2 terms of Trump, the second one much more transformative than the first, is anyone going to believe US idealism, knowing that at any point 4 years down the line, realism can come back and everything can be blown up? I think it will produce a logical, realist response from everybody else, including in the West and Canada. The issue is, within the realm of realism, what is realistic? What is actually feasibly realistic, even if you don't like what Trump is doing, given the world that he's created by saying we can act thus? And that's a very important discussion not enough people are having.